Hello and welcome to the what I guess is technically the fifth episode of the Five in the Midfield podcast. Today with me I have Matt and Corbin, and we are going to be breaking down the MLS in this one. It's going to be probably end up being a bit of a shorter episode, but it's more of just a single special episode MLS preview. Obviously, being the native league for us, we do want to cover it before it gets kicked off here in a couple days. So I guess first of all, guys, how are you doing tonight?
We're living.
Matt, you have to be having a bad day.
Yeah, well, Arsenal let me down pretty bad, but we're sorry.
I was gonna say you're not in the business of lying here, so you can go ahead and tell the truth.
You know what? We'll talk about that later. I think that's on the itinerary for later, so we'll get to that.
That's fair.
For sure.
I'd like to push that down. I'd like to push that down as long as I can.
Yeah, we will definitely be talking about everything that happened these past few weeks with Champions League and things like that. But again, we do want to start off with the MLS. But actually, funnily enough, the thing we're going to start with for the MLS is not a team, but rather a big talking point that LAFC owner Larry Berg had a comment basically quoted and paraphrased as the MLS will overtake MLB in the next 10 years as far as viewership ratings and other measurable popularity statistics, and then potentially the Premier League and the La Liga by 2045. So I think before we even get into any of the teams, I guess I just wanted to get your guys' take. What do you think about the prospect of kind of what he's saying is potential for the MLS growth in the next 10 years, and then obviously in the next 25 years, looking forward to some of the bigger European clubs, leagues.
Yeah, as far as taking over the MLB in the next 10 years, as far as viewership ratings go, I think that's incredibly realistic, adding Nashville and Inter Miami, and then hopefully other big cities get teams. That seems inevitable to me. MLB is falling, MLS rising. It's bound to meet at some point, and I think 10 years probably is a good guesstimate of that.
What was the other league he said? Because he said it was going to rise to third. It was MLB and what? The NHL, was it?
Yeah. So if they were third, that would be under the NBA and the NFL.
Okay.
NHL. Oh yeah.
Yes.
So he also said it would pass up NHL,
which is absolute garbage.
Yeah, I don't know if I can buy into that one.
Yeah,
I don't know what the viewership ratings off the top of my head are, but I don't think it seems realistic for the MLS to pass up the NHL in America.
It might be because we are in a city with an NHL team that is realistically growing, a fan base that is growing pretty well, and a team that's had success over the past couple of years. The NHL seems to be getting decently bigger, especially because people, I don't want to say are going away from American style football, but the way that they are not taking well to the rule changes and all the safety changes. And hockey, not truthfully, like hockey still allows fights, even though I actually, until like 2 weeks ago, I didn't know they did. And they still allow some sort of physical contact and physical violence. That does turn people's heads, and especially with the fast pace of the NHL, that definitely does help the NHL. But yeah, for the MLB, I have to imagine that that's pretty realistic. The MLB is not quite a dying sport, but it is definitely a league that is.
I would say it's pretty stagnant at this point. Yeah, I was gonna say it's which is obviously not what you want when your target audience is very specific for the MLB at this point.
Yeah.
I think it being a little too stagnant, I think, is what concerns people. But I don't know. My take on it is I don't really see how it's possible that the MLS could grow to that realm.
To the NHL realm or the MLB realm?
Kind of to both. Just because, the easiest way to explain it is that the best players do not play in that league, but every other sport where you're getting these massive viewership numbers, it is the best players. And at the end of the day, people want to see the best players doing, participating in their sport, and they don't necessarily care where it is. As you can see by people watch the Premier League all over the world. People watch other top European leagues all over the world. UCL is viewed in every single country. Like, people don't care about, like, people aren't going to want to watch, like, subpar American players run around when they could watch Messi like 2 channels over. Like, and that's not going to change in the next 2 years or the next 50 years. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
I will say this.
I'd like to point out, I'm sorry, Corbin, as of 2018-19, so I think as of 2019, attendance ratings, not just viewership, but just attendance in the stadiums, MLS is already above the NHL, and it's gaining on the MLB.
Well, that's also because you do have to think there are stadiums now.
Bigger stadiums, sure.
Well, there is that one outlier down in Atlanta where if they do get to a playoff game, that thing packs 60,000 people.
Sure.
So that does kind of skew the number a little bit. But I do want to talk about this. The average, there are teams that in their cities will take over their MLB like this season. So, for example, like new team Miami, the average attendance for a game for the Miami Marlins last year was barely over 10,000 people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to imagine that Miami's going to pack well more than 10,000 into that beautiful new stadium they just got.
And I would say one thing that definitely benefits, A, new clubs, but B, like specific clubs, is a lot of the, like, it's not like its own metric, but it's funny to me how, like, these teams that do have more of a Latin America kind of population, like, definitely are growing a lot faster in popularity, just because, like, the pride that people feel for, like, their Hispanic club in any, like, Central American country or things like that is, like, very similar to how people feel in European countries about their, hometown European team and things like that. Like, as far as fan passion, they're very similar. And I don't know that the MLS is quite there yet for every team, but there are a lot of teams for sure that have definitely started to establish that, which I think is why he feels very hopeful. And obviously for him specifically, he's a Los Angeles team. So, like, there's clearly going to be a lot of growth and popularity for his team because of the rising population, not just in the, like, Latino culture, but, like, literally just the rising population of California in general. So
and definitely, like, a big city like that, and obviously LAFC, LA Galaxy, as we'll get to here in just a few minutes, they will bring in a big name every single season. There's going to be a new big name in that city probably every single season.
Right.
And I don't think that's going to be too far off, or it's going to be at least a player that everyone has heard of. Like, last season was Carlos Vela, and he balled out. And this year with Zlatan Ibrahimovic leaving, it's going to be Chicharito, and he is expected to ball out, and he has been a humongous staple in LA, and he hasn't even played a game yet.
And building off what you said, Brendan, the cities with a high Latin American population, they're continuously getting teams. Miami this season, that is going to, they're going to have an Atlanta United impact. Off the bat, they should have an Atlanta United impact.
In the stands.
Austin, in the stands. And you're right. I guess you're right. On the field, maybe not as immediately, but that David Beckham run team within the next 5 years will become a staple at the top of the table in the MLS.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Austin, another Texas team, should gain at least an early following. It probably will die down, just like FC Dallas and Houston Dynamo support has in recent years. But as these big cities continue to get teams, especially big cities with Latin American followings, the viewership ratings will just continue to rise. So I think it is to me, it's inevitable that it will catch up to the MLB in the next 10 years. But again, I don't think NHL I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think MLS is going to catch up to the NHL anytime soon.
I think especially because the NHL has some younger sided talent who is coming out and absolutely going insane.
And it's just from an American perspective, it's just a fast-paced game with a lot of hitting.
It's a
Americans
lot.
Want that. Baseball,
a lot of
doesn't
action,
appeal. Baseball doesn't appeal to a lot of American, a lot of what they want anymore. But hockey, it absolutely still does. But can we go on to the next part of that, catching up to the Premier League and La Liga by 2045?
That's
So
so far-fetched.
I think so. Like my first reaction when I read that was obviously like after I got through the initial reaction, which was just like, okay, this guy's wildin'. My next reaction to that was like he clearly is using statistics that he's saying like if there's exponential growth every single year for the next 25 years, right? Like if you add a certain amount of people every year for the next 25 years, this is how big it could be. And it's like that's definitely the case, but
is it realistic?
I don't know. I don't buy that take at all.
No.
I think like again, if you're not going to have the top quality of players, it's going to be hard to grow your league past a certain point. Like, and I don't think the MLS is at that point. It can definitely grow a lot bigger without needing the best competition. But I think generally speaking, like without that competition, eventually you are going to hit like a point where you're not going to be able to grow that much more. And then eventually, obviously, like as most sports do, they'll decay at some point even. So I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely like a tough take, and it kind of feels like an advertising pitch as much as it does like actual statistical analysis of the league and like of popularity of the MLS and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, I guess, in the next like 20 to 25 years what the growth looks like, but I don't know if I necessarily see it getting to the sizes of these leagues who have been established forever, have not only domestic titles to play for, but also have Champions League on the line.
An actual Champions League.
And that's, Brennan, that's what I want to build on what you're saying. And I think Champions League is the perfect place to start. Champions League is the greatest club competition in the world. There's nothing that's going to stop it.
For any sport, really.
Ratings wise, you're absolutely right. It is any sport, the greatest club competition in the world. The MLS can't, no matter what they do, can't compete with that. And it is promising to see David Beckham getting guys like Neymar and Antoine Griezmann to show interest in coming to the United States at some point. But that is at some point. That's at the end of their careers. It's like Chicharito, the video of him crying when his move to LA Galaxy was official. It's like, it's unfortunate, but it's understandable. He recognizes he's coming to the MLS because he doesn't have many hopes overseas anymore in Europe. The MLS will never take over the Premier League and La Liga. That's where I want to take your statement one step farther. It will never take over Premier League and La Liga. Soccer, even if it is growing and even if it continues to grow in the United States, it will never be the main sport. Football and basketball for the next 100 years will be levels ahead of the MLS. Whereas in Europe, it is only soccer. It is live and breathe soccer. And that's what players want. They want to be in places where their fans and their community idolizes them. And because of that, the MLS will never get to that level of the Premier League and La Liga, Serie A, League One, and Bundesliga.
Yeah, and I'm going to build off of that a little bit. I mean, one thing that I think legitimately would kill the MLS in that argument, and I know this is a little bit crazy because we don't really think about this so much, is like there is a salary cap in this league, and there is not that anywhere else. Like you have financial fair play over in Europe, but at the same time, like you see over here, the biggest contract in MLS history is $7 million. I think Cristiano Ronaldo made that yesterday playing against Lyon, and he did nothing.
He posted a couple things on Instagram, and he made that up immediately.
Yeah. He made probably half of what Michael Bradley will make this season in 90 minutes.
Yeah, and because we're over here talking about, well, this team traded a player for general allocation money. And we're like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, and no one knows what that means.
Yeah, it's a weird. So that is another great point. Is that
it's that, and then I think
MLS should model their league after what the already established leagues do. Yeah,
I mean, but there is a danger to that, which we can get into at another time. But another thing I think that does hurt them, which in America we've been talking about for years now, is pro rel, because you do get these teams where you get into the later stages of the season. You know, like last year, maybe Columbus, Cincinnati, Vancouver, Montreal, teams like that. They were teams that weren't getting anywhere. They weren't getting into the playoffs, and you just you literally stop playing. Like you stop trying to even fight. Like you stop trying to fight for anything. There is no pressure on some of these players to go out and perform week in and week out, even in October, November.
I think that's an argument we should have at another time is promotion relegation, because that is something
definitely.
we could go deep into.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. That is another example of why, objectively speaking, European leagues are better than the MLS. I mean, I guess to all soccer fans, the playoffs just doesn't have the same impact
Not the same vibe.
Promotion relegation.
There's a nice crisp relegation battle between West Ham and Norwich next week.
And we're in for it, and we enjoy watching that.
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to get into the just the team?
Yeah. So let's go through the teams.
Yeah.
I know we had at least like a small thing to go through for each team to kind of preview them, and then obviously we can kind of bounce thoughts off of each other after we go through. But I guess Corbin, if you want to start with FC Cincinnati.
Yeah. So I do want to make sure we're going from last season standings, the worst team FC Cincinnati, and we're going
right. Yeah. So we're starting at the bottom of the league and then going all the way up to the top, team by team. So
Corbin, take it away.
Go ahead, Corbin.
All right. So FC Cincinnati, not too far from here. They were in their first season last year, finished very bottom of the league, and at this point, there's nowhere to go but up. Now in their second season, they got a really good, or at least what I think will be a really good acquisition in CM De Jong from Ajax. He should be pretty fun to watch in the attacking midfield position, and he's going to have a Dutch partnership right in front of him with a guy named Jurgen Locadia, and I think their big thing this season was shoring up the spine of that team, which is where they got picked apart for most of last season. So hopefully that'll be a good start to them, and then at that point they're just going to have to figure out a way to play defense.
Is Siom De Jong, is that a loan move to Cincinnati, or is he there permanently?
I'm fairly certain he is a permanent move.
Wow.
And then Jurgen Locadia, just for reference, is a current loan move from, again, Brighton and Hove Albion, obviously where he was at in the Prem. So.
Yep. But that's going to be a full season move still.
But yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys in particular have anything to say on FC Cincinnati. Obviously for us, like being from the Columbus area, having the Columbus Crew as our main team, FC Cincinnati was supposed to be like a very fun new team to rival us, and then kind of it ended up like both teams just kind of were shit last year.
Yep,
so
you're right.
Yeah.
It didn't like feel very good for the first year of the rivalry, but I know like as far as attendance and things like that, the like Battle for Ohio rivalry actually did
It did
do
pretty well. Yeah.
for viewership and all that stuff. And I know like my father is a season ticket holder for the Crew and for the Blue Jackets, but he like went to a lot of Crew games last year, and he especially went to the ones in Cincinnati, went to the home and the away games. So
yeah,
I think it definitely has some people excited. I would just like to see, at least from that perspective, like hopefully that not only the FC Cincinnati but the Columbus Crew can improve to kind of make that rivalry like more exciting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and also touching on Jurgen Locadia, he is supposed to be MLS has him listed as one of the top 50 players in the league to watch this season, so he definitely should be something to watch. Apparently a rather pacey guy in MLS. We have learned that's kind of, I mean, in American sports in general, speed kills, and especially in the MLS, that could definitely be a target point for Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati going into their second season, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you touched on it, Brendan. The Crew and Cincinnati rivalry is already fantastic, and it's interesting to see a team like Inter Miami and Nashville and LAFC a few years ago. They come in and they're on it. They have an incredible fan base. They get all the big names. Cincinnati, their fan support is just as passionate as those clubs. It's just unfortunate that they don't have the money that LA and Miami do. But Cincinnati's a team that they're fun to support because their supporters are just as passionate as any other support group in the country, in the league.
Well, and I think one thing that actually benefits FC Cincinnati, like their stadium being like kind of smaller is actually kind of sick, because like you're very much like packed in almost,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a big thing when they were from the NSL, right?
They were
Before?
from the USL, yeah.
The USL, okay, yeah. So like when they were in the USL, like even when they were a USL team, I remember a lot of people saying like FC Cincinnati is so fun to go to their games live because like you're packed in this like relatively small stadium, like, and the way that their stadium is actually designed, it's like kind of like a big bowl. So you're like, again, like you're looking almost straight down in some way, like onto the field, and it's again, it's kind of like a big
like
bowl,
the
which I think helps with
Coliseum
the
out in
atmosphere.
Pasadena, the Coliseum.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Same
just on
setup.
a much smaller like scale, but yes, and
Yeah.
I think that definitely benefits like the viewership, or like the
It's
willingness
just
for
the
people to go down.
atmosphere. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
the
the
Yeah.
atmosphere,
is
and
incredible.
again, it's one thing again, like it is in a college, it's right next to the University of Cincinnati, so like college kids are getting in there for cheap tickets, like, you know, going on a Thursday night, drinking, having fun, going crazy for some soccer. I think it's an ideal situation for them to be in. They just, need to get a little bit better.
This
Yeah, they just got to build that team, and they should here in the next few years have a team that can truly compete. Because last season they were not competitive in the slightest, but here
Right.
in the next few years, as they build, they'll be able to compete with other names, and hopefully they can build sustained success in the league.
Yeah, let's also not forget. I know this is kind of like it's almost irrelevant, but this is FC Cincinnati's last year at Nippert Stadium. Their new stadium and new facilities are scheduled to open before next season. So this will be their last season. But you guys are
So
right. I mean,
them and
they're
the crew are both getting new stadiums. Then?
yes. Yeah, so they will be toning down. I think their new stadium, I think FC Cincinnati's new stadium is actually downsizing, if I remember correctly.
Right. Well, that doesn't necessarily surprise me considering their current stadium is like the UC football stadium.
Yeah, I mean
Which
I've been there a couple times. They don't always fill it out, and for the most part, if they're playing like a mid-market team that's not Columbus, like if they're in a game against Toronto or in a game against realistically anyone that's not Columbus or LA, then they're going to close off the top deck in Nippert Stadium, and then they're just going to use the bottom deck for literally everything, which does pack you in a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Vancouver. Matt, if you want to go ahead and talk about Vancouver, they were the second to worst team last year, and let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, after an awful season last season, they brought in a club record signing, Lucas Cavallini, a Canadian from Club Puebla. I can't think off the top of my head of what the fee was, but it is a club record fee, and he made an immediate impact this preseason, scoring in their last 4 preseason games. So that is definitely a positive for Vancouver, but they still lack just general midfield talent, playmaking ability going forward, and overall their defense is bottom of the league. So Cavallini should be an exciting player to watch, but they're going to be bottom dwellers again. They should not be competing for anything. But I will say last season, I think it was either Vancouver or Montreal, I can't remember which one, won that Canadian Cup, the
Gotcha.
little tournament the Canadian teams have.
Right. Yeah.
So that is a mini
their Canadian,
victory.
like National League. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not to we don't have to go too deep on Vancouver, obviously, but what I would say is, I would say that generally speaking, like if you're a worse team and you have a lot of problems, like obviously, like you said, they were probably the worst defensive team last year and midfield talent like a little lacking. Like at that point, I kind of like the idea of them just like getting a club record fee for a striker and just being like, let's see if we can, just like pull goals out of the hat and like just try and improve. So, but let's move on to a team I think that's a little bit more interesting. And Corbin, you can kind of break this team down for me, but we have Orlando City next. And if you want to go ahead and kind of take it away with Orlando City, we will talk about them.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if more exciting is the correct word. I think the only way you can say that is they do have former Man United standout Nani, who is trying to push a club forward with almost nothing to work with. I mean, they've had a couple, maybe 3 horrible seasons now. I can't really see them doing too different this year. They have a new manager in Oscar Pereira, who has previously managed an MLS, I believe, for FC Dallas and also at Club Tijuana. And he's going to attempt, I would have to imagine, I don't believe they've been to the playoffs yet, have they?
I have
Yeah,
not.
so he's going to attempt to take them to the playoffs for the first time. But I will say losing Sasha Kljestan, Will Johnson, and those legs are definitely not going to be helping them. They did bring some talent in that might help them out. They have a new Peruvian goalkeeper in Pedro Galese, a couple of Brazilians in Junior Ursa, who is supposed to be probably one of their stars this season. Colombian attacking midfielder, I believe he's an attacking midfielder, Andreas Perea, and he should be decent. But again, I think Nani is probably going to be the one standout on that team, and I'm not too terribly sure how they're going to scrape themselves into the playoffs this season.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much going for Orlando. And I think it's interesting because when they came into the league, they brought Kaká in immediately. They brought in Ricardo freaking Kaká immediately, and it has been straight downhill from there.
Yeah.
They have not made any positive progress. And it seemed like last season when they brought in Nani, it seems like, they're still willing to make these big signings. They have the money
And
to do so.
They certainly, I was gonna say, they certainly have the market to bring in stars, but it just doesn't. And I think one thing that's gonna end up.
I'm sorry, they lost Lamine Sané too. They're the best defender last season.
Yeah,
Didn't replace him too well.
One thing that is gonna hurt them is actually Inter Miami joining the league, because Orlando is, as the only team from Florida, Orlando was definitely the spot, but Inter Miami is very quickly going to become the destination for superstar players, if not LA, in the MLS. I have a feeling, and obviously we'll touch on them later, but yeah, I don't know. Obviously Nani being there always gives them a shot to be at least a little bit decent, but I don't know how much they'll actually be able to do without some of the star power they had in Kaká. And I mean, obviously star power didn't even get them into the playoffs in the first place, so what are they really supposed to do?
Yeah, they're still they're a young team, still figuring it out. Young team is in a new team, still figuring it out.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, with Miami coming into the league, that just dilutes the Florida market, and it seems like it's either Miami or LA now going forward.
It's going to be, especially because David Beckham is running Miami.
Yeah,
and who doesn't want to be associated with the name David Beckham?
It'll be tough going forward for Orlando.
One thing I do want to bring up, though, about Orlando is I think you guys did overlook this maybe, is the fact that they do have Dom Dwyer. He's one of the best MLS strikers of all time, and he's still not overly that old. I think he's somebody that can bring them. I think if he brings in how he's been playing this preseason, along with Nani's talent that he obviously has, and a couple of these other new guys, I actually do think this could be the season that actually do make it to the playoffs. I don't know. I just really like the form that they've been in so far this preseason, alongside Dom Dwyer, and playing along with Nani, playing along with Andres Perea, and all those guys, all those new guys are in there as well. I think this could be the season they finally make a playoff push.
Yeah, they definitely have the players, the talented players, who, if they step their game up, if they take it to the next level, they could be a threat, especially going forward with Dom Dwyer and Nani. But
I'm very interested to see what their tactics are with Dom Dwyer and not Nani, because Nani last year played a lot through the middle, and especially in his prime days, that's not something we saw a lot of. And knowing soccer as a sport in general, we know a lot of the body to body contact, or where you have to play a lot faster and a lot more technical, always is through the middle. So I don't know if that's really going to suit them as much, because Dom Dwyer isn't truthfully the most technical striker, even though, as Colin said, he is historically probably one of the MLS's most lethal strikers of all.
Yeah, at his peak, he was one of the best strikers in the MLS.
All right, well, I would definitely agree. Now let's go on to the next team, which is Sporting Kansas City. Obviously, for Sporting Kansas City, I don't know if you have something to lead off with, Matt, you can go ahead.
I mean, missed the playoffs again last season, but I love loved, I should say, some of the names on the team last season. They bring back Matt Biesler and Graham Zusi, who are a couple of my all-time favorites, but they're both at least 50 years old now. I mean,
Definitely
they're
true.
old, but then they also lost Benny Feilhaber. Same issue. He was just an old player, but he's staying in the MLS. Is he going to? I think it's NYCFC.
Benny Feilhaber?
Or is he?
I can double check that for you real
Yeah.
quick if you want to keep going.
And then Jedion Zalalem, who's just a young talent, but talent.
Is he still young?
Quotes. He's young for sure, but the question is he still a talent going forward? But Sporting KC, they just lost. I mean, as I said, Feilhaber, Seth Sinovich, Adrian Zendejas. They lost so much. They did bring in club record signing forward Alan Pulido. They brought in another forward, Kyrie Shelton, and they brought in Winston Reed from West Ham on loan. So they definitely brought in, and it seems like it should be enough to replace what they lost.
Mm-hmm.
But that leaves them still are they chasing a playoff spot? They have defensive issues from last season. They gave up a lot of goals last season, and Biesler and Zusi are still starting. They're still going to be starters for the team. So the question is, can they fix their defensive issues and use that newly founded attacking presence to take them to the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how Matt Biesler's going to do this season, especially with him getting up there in age. I mean, he's always been a rock at the back for Kansas City, and occasionally for the men's national team. But especially with getting up there in age and the speed that is coming into the league now, especially because I believe they are a Western Conference team. They are definitely going to have some struggles in the back, but I don't think they're gonna have many struggles going forward. They might be like an Atalanta looking side where they're just gonna score a lot, and then pray to God they can just outscore whoever they're playing.
And I want to clarify, when you say Atalanta, we are talking about the Italian side. We're just, you know, we're talking MLS right now, so let's not confuse it with Atlanta.
Fair. That's fair. Sorry. Yeah.
No, but you're absolutely right. I mean, with what is it, Gianluca Busio staying from last season along with the new attackers, on paper, they should have
decent.
at least an above average front three, if not better than that. But they do have some serious issues in the back that they need to fix before. Before long,
gonna have a problem honestly. Or two. Yeah, I mean, they should probably fix them. I mean, there is a trade deadline in MLS, but you also have to remember, like, along with that, there is a transfer window in the middle of the season, which they can technically use. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get out and just go snag an older center back.
But the issue with that is, again, they did just bring in a club record signing, so money might be tight for them. I don't know what their owner's situation is. I don't know what their salary cap situation is.
Yeah, and they're also a mid-market team who realistically probably isn't bringing in the profits that LA, Seattle, and like all the big teams are.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it'll be tough for Kansas City this season. I don't see them making the playoffs. I would love to see Zusi and Biesler do well. I love watching them play in the past, at least. This season, it'll be tough to watch them play, I think. But I don't see this being a successful season for KC.
Alrighty. Well, now we have reached the point where we get to talk about the club that we probably care the most about, which is now the Columbus Crew. Obviously coming off a disappointing season last year, finishing 10th in the East. I know obviously you guys are going to probably be much more opinionated about this than I, so I don't want to take up the time. I will let you guys go ahead. But I will just say before I do that, I'm very excited for the Crew, not necessarily as much this year, but going forward with the new stadium coming into town. I think a lot of people from Columbus share the sentiment that once this new stadium gets built in the more downtown area by where the Blue Jackets play, by where the Columbus Clippers play, by things like that, that generally speaking, we'll most likely see an increase of attendance. And yeah, so that's basically all I wanted to say before we got into it. And I know you guys both have thoughts on Gyasi Zardes and things like that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to start. I want to build off of your comment about the future of the Columbus Crew for just a second. And I want to start with just a quick plug to say, fuck off, fuck Austin FC. No, just everything about them. I want them to fail
Fair.
as quickly as they can. I honestly forget the owner's name because
Anthony
I just
Precourt.
hate him so much. Yes, Anthony Precourt.
Yeah, Precourt.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, shout out Jimmy Haslam for doing that was the highlight of the Browns season, was their owner buying the Columbus Crew.
Yeah, a fat highlight. A fat highlight and a fat thank you. So Jimmy Haslam, you probably will never hear this, but the whole city of Columbus really appreciates you and getting that absolute dunce cap and
Actually,
Anthony
go
Precourt
ahead.
out of my city because
I do have
do
one
not
thing
like him.
before we give our actual analysis of the team. So Columbus Crew recently tweeted out a video about the new Ohio Health Performance Center that's going to be a part of the training facility and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kai Kamara, obviously former Crew player, tweeted, "Wow, bring me back for this." And my man Casey Casper at CCasper1986 replied to him saying, "Not even Ohio Health can cure locker room cancer at Kai."
No.
Which is actually one of the funniest replies I've ever seen. So I just wanted to make sure that we put that in there because that is actually pure gold.
Wow.
It's actually gold.
It's god. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
as much as a locker room cancer as he was, we did go to an MLS Cup with him, which is the probably the funnier part about that.
Everyone's least favorite type of cancer is club locker room cancer for sure.
Facts.
So.
All right, but into the
analysis
analysis
let's get
here,
into it with
so
the
we
team.
can kind of stay on track here and not just go off on people for the rest of the night.
Go ahead.
But yeah, a disappointing season for the Crew last year with a new manager first in charge, Caleb Porter, a well known MLS coach around the parts of Ohio and pretty much the entire country now.
I would venture to say he's a legend in the MLS game, in the MLS history. He's one of the greatest coaches that I think has been in the MLS.
I mean,
his whole career.
He's definitely going to go into the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame when it's said and done. I mean, a lot of the players that he started with are now MLS players. I mean, thinking about that 2010 Akron team that he had, who had the likes of Darlington Nagbe, Will Trapp,
Yedlin, right?
DeAndre Yedlin was on that team. I believe Perry Kitchen was also on that team.
He was.
If I remember correctly, and that team was stacked.
Yeah.
And they easily blew through the NCAA, won a national title. But with Caleb Porter back in Ohio, the Crew made a humongous move this winter, bringing in a club record signing Lucas Zelarayan. He should be absolutely firing on all cylinders. He's looked good in preseason so far. He's pretty much going to be the replacement straight up for Federico Higuain. He is younger than Higuain, I think, ever was in Columbus during his time. I watched a couple preseason games online, and he is very, very active. He wants the ball a lot. He wants on the ball as much as he can, and he is extremely creative, which should give the Crew another dimension rather than just this basic possession, get it wide and cross it in. He definitely has a state of attack and find the gaps in the defense. So that should be good. That should complement the rest of the midfield together, which will probably be new signing again, Darlington Nagbe, who also is an MLS. He's probably a more well-known MLS player. Also, MLS has him in the top 50 as well. They actually have them both on the top 50.
I'd imagine, yeah. I would imagine.
I mean, it's rather surprising that Darlington Nagbe is getting up there in age, and he's realistically probably still a top 25 player in the MLS. But they will have him definitely playing in a deeper role, probably next to Artur, which is going to replace a longtime captain Will Trapp, the hometown hero, unfortunately leaving to Inter Miami.
Sad boy hours for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely sad boy hours. When I woke up from that nap and saw that, I actually shed a tear. Especially because Will Trapp was still in high school when I was a freshman, and I stood on the same field as him for a few minutes, which is incredible to think about.
At least a few minutes. You
Yeah,
got
I
a
mean,
few
it
minutes.
That's Corbin's claim to fame
that is
for
100%
sure.
my claim to fame that I played against Will Trapp and actually like looked him in the face when he was 18 years old before he got to Akron. But yeah, it was absolutely insane to think about all the work that the crew have done this season and this winter, excuse me, and starting construction on that new stadium. They're definitely turning in the right direction, and that Lucas Zelarayan move is going to be a humongous start. This could be definitely a major season for the crew. I do think they get back into the playoffs. I don't know how strong they're going to be in reference to the rest of the East. Obviously, with Atlanta coming in, I'm going to have to imagine Inter Miami is going to be pretty decent. And then there's going to be a couple teams in there that definitely are going to be at the top of the East. But I could see them definitely making the playoffs and maybe even getting a home game or two.
Listen, I don't want to spend too much time on Columbus because I feel like a little bit of Columbus bias is getting involved here.
Of course.
But I was on the MLS soccer website today, and a number of predictions from their analysts were saying the crew they are going to be a playoff team, and a few of them even had them as high as top 3, top 2.
I would say that's definitely reasonable though. Like if you look at the season, if you look at the season
in the East, I should say, in the conference, in the Eastern Conference.
I was gonna say, if you look at the season they had last year though, like Jesse Zardes is, I mean, at least for my money, one of the best strikers in the MLS.
King.
I mean, like yeah, like everyone memes like he's the tap-in king for sure, but
he gets the job done.
There's something to be said to being the tap-in king.
Yeah.
If we're being honest, the biggest loss the crew have had is Zach Steffen. We went half a season without him last year, but now a full season without the best goalie in the MLS. We'll see how it affects the team. But the defense is still completely intact. Did not lose anything on the defensive side this offseason.
And I do want to follow that Zach Steffen comment up on Eloy Room, who is now going to be the starting goalkeeper for Columbus. Although not as big of a name, and definitely I wouldn't say has the stature that Zach Steffen does, is definitely still an agile, active keeper. I mean, he is quick to get off his line. He is quite a decent shot stopper. So although he might not be up to the task that Zach Steffen was, I definitely think he's going to help the team quite a bit. Sure up the back line.
All right, yeah. So for a couple of these next few clubs, we can kind of just run through them real quick. I know like most of you guys, I mean, you guys may have something to say, but I know like for most of these, we're probably not going to have too much to talk about. But for Houston Dynamo, obviously the big thing for them is they bring in the US U20 manager, Tab Ramos. And then as far as acquisitions, they got Darwin Quintero from Minnesota United. But they actually kind of lost more than they gained, I would say, in the offseason, because obviously DeMarcus Beasley finally retired and AJ De La Garza went to Miami. And then both of their goalies are gone now. So I don't know if you guys have any like specific thoughts you want to give about Houston Dynamo, or if you kind of want to leave them in the spot that we...
Well, I think I should clarify for the next few teams, the reason that we might not have much to talk about is just because they didn't do much this offseason. There's just not much movement.
Right, it's like their position in the MLS probably will not change much this year is kind of the point I was looking to make.
But for Houston, I think Quintero is going to be a massive signing going forward. But then they still bring back Matthias Vera, who... is one of the better, I'm not going to say one of the best, but he is one of the better CDMs in the league. So as far as positives, we can talk about the Dynamo. They've got a great attacker in Quintero, and they've got one of the better CDMs in the league. But as we just said, other than that, I mean, Tab Ramos is fantastic. It spent, 8 years as the U20 manager?
Yep, and the whole Chicago rule style just completely just said, we're not doing the U.S. job anymore. So Houston Dynamo was like, we'll take you.
Yeah, so it definitely is a fantastic signing from Houston to get him. But I still don't think they're a playoff team.
Mm-mm.
I don't think they're bottom dwellers. I don't think they'll be fighting to avoid that bottom 2 or 3 spots. But I don't think they're going to be pushing too hard for the playoffs this season.
Right. Okay. Well, we can move on now to our next team, which of course is Montreal. Finished 9th in the East last season, just one step above the Columbus Crew. Montreal's big thing is that they lost Ignacio Piatti, who was, again, probably one of the best players in the MLS, if not maybe the best player in the MLS, at least for some part of last season, which is going to hurt. And, you know, even though they do have Thierry Henry now as their new manager, and it's going to be his first season in charge of Montreal, which is exciting as far as just like name brand or name value for that team, I don't really know that losing Piatti and not really getting too much else makes them any better or worse.
Yeah, I mean, they did nothing positive for themselves in this offseason. They might get a couple more people in the stands because they have Thierry Henry as a coach, but let's not forget he was at Monaco and got fired within what 2 months. So it was just something dumb. He doesn't.
Again,
I
But
mean,
that's not
it
exactly
seems
his fault, though.
yeah, it's not 100% his fault, but like at some point, like he does have to take a little bit of the blame for that, and that has to. And if you are a Montreal Impact supporter, that does have to make you nervous that you have no star player, you have a coach that is not completely proven but didn't do great in his first job stint, and you are definitely looking like a bottom dweller team this season.
at least for Thierry Henry, though, it is a much smaller role.
Yeah.
And again, to your original point, like he probably sells extra seats for sure. I think half the Montreal fans going to the game are hoping he'll just like rip off his suit and be in a full uniform ready to play, but we'll see what happens.
Bring him back.
So yeah, for me, the interesting talking point about Montreal is Henry recently said in the last week has said he wants to manage Arsenal someday.
Good luck.
So this
The interesting point about Montreal for Matt is not anything to do with Montreal.
this stint at Montreal can show if he can manage or if he cannot manage. And I think that is because you're right. Montreal do not have any they don't have any big name players, if we're being honest. So what Thierry Henry can do this season, can he take him one step farther, push for the playoffs? And then going down the road, can he consistently make the playoffs? Because he wants to manage in Europe. He wants to manage at the top tier, the top clubs in the world. He has that desire. So this is an important step for him, and that's the main talking point about Montreal this season.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to Chicago Fire. Manager George Heitz is having his first full season in charge. But they didn't really do anything else. Didn't really make any interesting moves, I would say. Didn't really... yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of a weird thing for Chicago Fire. It's going to be basically more of the same last year, it seems like. But they finally actually now have, of course, their former interim manager now as their full-time coach heading in for this season.
And a new emblem.
Which is
That's
ugly,
true.
which is horrendous.
Yeah, they did get a new logo, which is, I guess, the big talking point for Chicago Fire, unfortunately, because they didn't really get any new players. But again, they seem very much like a mid-table team going forward either way.
Yeah, I do want to say this. Is Paxton Pomykal playing for Chicago Fire, or am I in the wrong city?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
I actually cannot remember who he plays for.
Well, either way. Let's move on to the Colorado Rapids then, so we can quickly move forward here. The Colorado Rapids, after recording 0 wins in their first 11 games last season, Colorado finished in 9th place. Obviously, Tim Howard is officially retired and gone from the club. And Reuben Foster is now going to be their manager heading into his first full season in charge. And they did make a couple of notable signings. Obviously, Lawless Abubakar kind of being the big one, I would say. And then, of course, they do have Kai Kamara and Kelly Acosta, who are both really, really good players, at least at the MLS level for sure. So,
yeah, they're improved from last season. It looks like they're an improved team, and they should be a team pushing for a playoff spot this season.
Right, yeah.
I mean, they're a fringe team. They're right on that edge of the playoff line.
They are a team that definitely does have the tools to get the job done when a push goes on, though. I mean, I do think they slide into the playoffs. I mean, Kellen Acosta is a baller. I know I have a lot of love for Kai Kamara, even though he did not have a lot of love for my city. I do think he is one of the better athletic strikers in the entire league. And I do think that they will have a decent look this season, and especially with Jack Price returning in the midfield. I do think that should improve them from last season with Jack Price having a good season under his belt. It should definitely help them get into a playoff spot this season.
Yeah, so next we move on to San Jose. San Jose, honestly, more of the same for them. I mean, Chris Wondolowski is still like being well over 30 years old and banging in goals. Christian Espinoza, I guess, is kind of their other notable name. But besides that, nothing really too crazy to speak of. If I was making a prediction, I would guess that they'll probably finish actually worse than they did last year, despite not making any moves, because it seems like a lot of teams actually improved that were below them. Obviously, like the Crew, the Rapids, I would say both are the ones that jump off the paper for me as far as teams that have improved. So I don't know if you guys have any differing thoughts on San Jose, but I don't really see anything crazy going on with them.
No, I have nothing
differing. I have seen analysts say that they are going to be the worst team in the MLS this season.
Gotcha, yeah.
So, yes, technically they will be battling relegation. If we were to put this in other terms, they are going to be one of the bottom 3 teams in the league.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of does it for San Jose. Obviously, again, not too much to talk about for them. So we can move on now to the New England Revolution, who have made a big signing in the offseason, but it is not a player. It is former USMNT coach Bruce Arena now becoming the head manager of the club. And then reigning MLS newcomer of the year, Carlos Gil, who had 10 goals last year, hoping to have a repeat performance last year that he did. And if he can have that, they could be in a pretty good spot going forward to try and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much hit it all. I'm really excited to see Carlos Gil play. I didn't see too much of him last season, especially, but with being the newcomer of the year, he does look like he's in a good spot. He'll come off the right-hand side, if I remember correctly. And he is a very talented, very quick, pacey winger who definitely he'll probably up his goal tally, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely should up his goal tally. It's the question now is, can Bruce Arena go from a disappointing stint as the U.S. manager? Can he revive his image in the MLS?
I love how when we hear the name Bruce Arena, it's not what did you do in the past when he was really good. It's that one little stint with the U.S. men's national team where he only had like 8 games in charge, but he sucked and we didn't make the World Cup, and now everyone hates him, and it's hilarious.
Because no, you're right, Corbin. I think we should recognize what he has done in the MLS as a manager. No, we definitely should, because he has been an incredible MLS manager in the past. But now for U.S. soccer fans, he's got to prove himself again, is what he has to do.
Yep, and I don't know if he can do that with this exact team. I'm not sure.
It'll be
exactly
tough,
how they finish,
but New England is not one of the worst teams. This is a team that I feel like we've said it a few times already for other teams, but they should be pushing to fight for the playoffs. They're not going to be one of the best teams. They're not going to be one of the worst.
We hope so. We hope for an interesting MLS season, but, we don't always get that.
We don't, but this New England team should be one of the teams that makes it interesting.
Yep, it might.
All right. Well, we can move on to FC Dallas. FC Dallas actually, at least, I believe, was the most active team in the offseason.
Had to be pretty close.
Not to go through every single transfer, but they did lose Dominique Bagy, Eric Alexander, Moises Hernandez, Jacori Hayes, and actually a few others. But they did get Thiago Santos. And obviously they still are accompanied with 2 notable, at least I guess notable in quotation marks for us on the international level. Obviously USMNT starters or regulars Reggie Cannon and Matt Hedges, who are both obviously pretty good. And then I guess it is notable like that they did make the playoffs last year. Are they the first team I think on our list here that officially was a playoff team last year? Or was New England?
Are we into the playoff teams now? Let's double check.
I'm not too terribly
no, I just want to say,
that.
I mean, we did put like kind of in our own notes, like this is the first, they came off a first round exit in the playoffs last year. Obviously it is notable that they lost to the eventual champion in the first round. So like you can't blame them too much for that, I guess.
No.
But again, a lot of changes to this team, but I think overall probably more of the same for FC Dallas, where their defense is going to be really good, and it's going to be interesting to see where they can get goals from. Obviously, Michael Barrios is pretty good, and Brian Acosta also. Definitely good MLS level strikers, but I don't know. At least for me, I feel like this is going to be a team that needs to be really good defensively and isn't going to be as focused going forward as they try to make a push to get back, into the playoffs again.
So I should point out, New England was a playoff team. They were the first playoff team. So
so New England and FC Dallas are now the two playoff teams that we've covered. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I do want to add in. I did look it up. This is where Paxton Pomacall is. So Paxton Pomacall plays for FC Dallas.
Gotcha. Yeah.
He is probably one of my, if not my favorite young player that is going to come through the U.S. ranks within the next couple of years. I'm hoping he'll be in the Olympic team this summer. We can touch on that at a different time. But I definitely think he will be able to help boost the attack and provide some deadly balls up front for the likes that you said, Brendan. I completely forget the names already. I don't know how.
For their strikers?
Yes.
Brian Acosta and Michael Barrios.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, he definitely should be able to provide some spark for them, and this team should have a decent amount of spark, and I can definitely see them pushing into the playoffs this season. Not sure how well they can push for a home game, but they should do that as well. Yes, Matt, continue.
Corbin, let me repeat what you just said. I don't want to get too deep into it, but we should mention, we're halfway through now, we should mention Olympics are this summer and Euros are this summer. So this MLS schedule, teams are going to lose some of their big names potentially to Euros and to Olympics.
Yes, and
for a period of time. I
believe there is an Olympic break, but the Olympics don't start till like late July. So let's not forget those two tournaments come at different times. So the Euros run from, I think it's mid-June to early to mid-July, and the Olympics don't start till late July. I think the Olympics themselves start on the 24th. I don't know when the soccer tournament starts, but that will be what some of these teams are going to face, especially on the men's side. The soccer tournament is only a U23 tournament, and you are only allowed to bring X amount of players that go over the age of 23. Like, for example, Egypt is taking Mohamed Salah this summer.
Right. So again, I don't want to dive too deep into it, but some of these teams, the big names that we're listing and that we're going to list here as we get into the better teams in the league,
may be gone for a good stand.
Exactly. They may be losing some players for a portion of the season because of the Olympics.
You hear that, MLS? Never get good players because they'll just leave you. That's basically what we can take.
So Dallas, again, I think they're a team that could surprise people in terms of they may make a deep run, a quarterfinal, a semifinal run in the playoffs.
I think they will.
Yeah, they definitely could.
I think they do.
But it's not one of those seasons that it depends on. Like LAFC, Seattle, it's do or die. It's cup or nothing. Dallas, they can build on this season, on last season, continue to build this season, and keep going for the future.
I'll save my comment for later. We can continue on.
Okay. Yes, we got.
Alrighty. Yeah. So next is the New York Red Bulls. If one of you guys wants to go through them.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one because I love any team sponsored by Red Bull.
That's fair.
Because I love Red Bull. The biggest thing that happened this summer, I guess they had two massive things happen this summer. Bradley Wright Phillips, one of the all-time greats in the MLS, gone to LAFC. Not that he's at this point any impact to LAFC, but he's going to be just a rotation player. But he's gone from New York. And then Luis Robles, one of the better goalkeepers for the past 4 or 5 seasons in the MLS, is gone. Kamar Lawrence, one of the better fullbacks in the MLS, is gone. So they did lose a lot of their team for the last 4 or 5 seasons. But they do still have Aaron Long, one of the – is he a starting center back for the USMNT? Or is he just a rotation?
That depends. It kind of depends on the day, because obviously the U.S.
I would safely call him a rotation player.
Yeah, I probably would call him a rotation player.
I think in a first-team competition, like if the World Cup was this year, I don't think he would be our starting center back.
But he's in the
I would
team.
say.
He's in the.
He normally
yeah.
gets in the team, but I mean the U.S. men's national team center backs are ever changing, so you really don't know who the two starters are, to be honest with you.
But Aaron Long has gotten his number of chances.
Yes,
So
of course.
the Red Bulls still have him anchoring the defense, Kaku at creating going forward at center mid, and Daniel Royer on the wing. So they do still have a lot of their production at every level. But when you weigh in everything they lost and everything they kept, and they didn't gain much this offseason. They really didn't. They finished 6th in the Eastern Conference last season.
So they scraped into the playoffs.
Yeah, they scraped in. I personally don't see them getting much better. But it is the New York Red Bulls, and they have some pretty big names. I feel like they're a team that can definitely keep pace at that 6th spot. They're going to be competing very hard all season, is what I'll leave it at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say, I guess they could compete. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them to get anywhere. I think it's going to be difficult for them to get into the playoffs. I think Aaron Long should help them in the back, but my problem with them is going to be I don't know where their goals are going to come from. Bradley Wright Phillips was the answer for goals in New York for a long time. Or I guess they're technically in New Jersey, if I remember correctly. Yeah. But he has been the Red Bulls' answer for goals for a long time, and now trying to replace him they didn't. That's the issue, and I don't know exactly what they plan to do without him yet.
Yeah, they have some things to figure out going forward. Like I said, Daniel Royer is still there on the left wing, so he's at least some experience, at least some prestige for them. But as far as getting a guy that can score 15, 20 goals, yeah, they have a lot to figure out there.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So next team we have is the Portland Timbers, who of course are coming off a year where they made the playoffs last year. Diego Valeri is still the face of the franchise, of course. Nothing too crazy changes with them. Obviously, they finished 6th last year in the West, and I think probably about more of the same for Portland.
Yeah, I'm not thinking too different either. I mean, I don't think they made too many big moves. I mean, that corner of Cascadia is always fun to watch between them, Seattle, and Vancouver's up there, right? I'm not weird. Or I'm not dumb.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I was gonna say Vancouver's the third. Vancouver's the third team that's in that Cascadia Cup, but those are always some fun games to watch. Always games that I have to tune into. Diego Valeri is one of the MLS's premier players. I don't think there's a question about it. But yeah, I honestly with them not making a lot of moves and them staying stagnant with their roster. I don't really know what to expect from these guys.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a young team. I can't name many young, exciting players on this team right now. It seems like they're coasting off of Valeri and off of Diego Chara, and it's worked for them. I mean, last season it works.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends.
Yeah, it's tough to predict if these guys can keep their pace or if they're going to drop off this season. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting time. I'm trying to look at their roster now to see if there's any more notable names, but maybe Danny Asperia, who's been there for quite a while as well. Other than that, Sebastian Blanco's been there for a little bit, but there's not any new, brand new names that are coming into their team that would help them out a lot. I will say Steve Clark is probably going to be their starting goalkeeper. I will say he is a decent goalkeeper, but again, in Columbus, I don't like him because he cost us MLS Cup. So I will take him with a grain of salt, but I will say he is a decent goalkeeper, which he probably will make a couple of fantastic saves to keep them in games this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belittle Portland when I say that it doesn't seem like they have too much excitement. They made the playoffs last year, and not much happened this offseason.
Right.
So they still have it should be relatively the same team this season that made the playoffs last season. So they could very well do it again, but it doesn't seem like there's much intrigue around this team. And Valeri and Diego Chara, how old is Chara? seems like he's been there for a second.
Got to be up there.
Yeah, it
I
seems.
believe if you,
I believe
if you Google his age, I believe it just says not getting any younger.
Yeah.
I mean,
So they're
if I
bound
had
to
to
drop
guess,
off
he'd
at
be
some
mid
point.
30s. I'm gonna say 34.
So they're bound to drop off at some point. It's a question of when, and
Yeah.
it could be this season. It could not be this season.
The good thing is for them is when they do see that drop off happening, they do have Portland Timbers too, who are in the USL, and it's not. I mean, obviously the jump from USL to MLS is rather large, but it is better than just like trying to do it all in like an MLS Super Draft. Like
Right,
it's going to be a
they have
little
a
bit easier for
good-
them. Yeah, I mean
have a
they have a
good
very
team.
very solid youth
Well-
system, which you don't really hear about a lot over here.
Well, I think this is a good spot then, I guess, to move on to DC United, who I, right off the bat, will consider to be maybe in a similar situation. Obviously, they finished 5th in the East last year, but, I mean, they really didn't add anything, and they lost probably their 2 best players, I would say, in Wayne Rooney, obviously leaving, and then they also, Paul Arriola, is going to be out for the entire season, most likely, after he tore his ACL in the preseason just a few weeks ago. So, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, it is important to note that Edison Flores joined the club on a record fee, but I mean, I don't really know, like when you lose Paul Arriola and Wayne Rooney, who to me, like when I thought of DC United, those are the 2 players that obviously immediately jumped out, and then besides them, I guess it was Bill Hamid, but like, I mean, not to get into Bill Hamid, but I've never been impressed with Bill Hamid personally, at least not on the international level. At the MLS level, he's been a decent goalie for sure, but without any sort of offensive, like, pieces going forward, I think with losing Wayne Rooney and Paul Arriola, it's going to be very tough for them this year.
Yeah,
I want to
go
note
ahead,
that
Matt.
they did bring in Julian Gressel from Atlanta on a big what is I think we have written down here, even the biggest money allocation fee of all time in the MLS.
So
again,
Julian,
whatever that means, but he was a fantastic player in Atlanta, and now there's no replacing Wayne Rooney and Paul Arriola.
No,
but
definitely not.
I do want to add.
They brought
I
in
do
the
want to
club
add.
record fee, and they brought in Julian Gressel, so they should be. They did take steps to replace them.
Excuse me. I do want to add they are rumored to go after Federico Higuain, who was the one that left the crew this season. I don't know how much that really would change them. Obviously, he is up there in age as well.
36-year-old doesn't seem to too much of an impact.
Yeah, but I mean, I definitely don't think he will be much of an impact, but I mean, he definitely would be at least a step in replacing Wayne Rooney. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't think he does enough to completely replace Wayne Rooney. But also,
so Federico Higuain actually, from what I'm reading, is on the market to be joining DC United, but it's actually as a player assistant coach.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
he
a
would
very
be joining
weird role, but it's kind of like what Wayne Rooney's in at Derby County.
Right. So he would be partly coach and then also partly, I guess, a player if they do need, which I think is a fair role to put him in. I would say
it's a very interesting
all
role.
things considered.
I mean, it's a very interesting role, but I do want to also add Yamil Assad is a player who comes into this side as well, and he should provide at least a decent spark to at least give you a reason to watch this team.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on. Again, we're kind of slowly making our way through all these teams. We have still, I think, probably about 10 more to go-ish. So I do want to start moving through these a little bit quicker so we can kind of get this going. But LA Galaxy is the next team. Obviously, they've ended up losing in the quarterfinals to their Los Angeles counterpart. And despite having a negative goal differential, they still should be in for a pretty good season. Obviously, they lose Zlatan and remain Alessandrini, but they did bring in Chicharito from West Ham. And then as well, they also added Sasha Kleistin, who should both be able to bring them something, I would say, exciting in LA, and hopefully keep them in that area where they're definitely in the hunt for the playoffs. So,
Chicharito from Leverkusen Am I right?
Yes, sorry. He
Yeah.
was on loan at West Ham from Leverkusen.
Okay.
Yeah, rejoined Leverkusen and then moved to LA. You're right.
Not that it really matters. He cried coming to the MLS either way, but
Yeah,
fantastic.
right.
Fantastic ad. I mean,
as far as name value, like this team's always gonna have big names, of course. Christian Pavone, Jonathan Dos Santos, Sebastian Yagay. Like they have a lot of big names, and they're one of the most historic clubs in the MLS. So like, it's almost going to be impossible for them, I think, in this position to not be a playoff team. But they're always an interesting team to watch for sure, just with the amount of like star name power that they have in the league for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Corbin, I'll give you a second here to add on, but Brendan, I think you just said it perfectly right. The way this team is, they're never not going to be an intriguing team that's pushing for the playoffs. And the way it looks this season, they're a lock for the playoffs, if you ask me. It's just, can they compete with Atlanta, LA, FC, and Seattle and Toronto? Can they compete with them this season?
I'm going to say this is a team that should never not be competing for an MLS Cup. Let's get that clear. I mean, they did miss the playoffs the first season with the Zlatan, but that's literally because they started so bad that it was unrecoverable. And that's the thing that they're not going to be able. I don't know if they'll be able to get off to. I mean, the thing that I will say with the Chicharito transfer, because that is probably one of my favorite transfers of this winter, is he does bring a different aspect of the game than Zlatan did. Although he definitely is not as natural of a goal scorer, not as pure of a finisher. He is a lot more active up front than Zlatan is. I mean, Zlatan will just sit up there and he roams around lightly. And then when it's time for him to pounce, he pounces. Now, Chicharito's going to drop in. He's going to find the ball. He's going to play a little bit more link up than Zlatan did. And he's still well and able to get on the end of a cross or get on the end of a ball or finish at any time. And I do think that adds a side to LA that they may have been missing the past couple of years. I don't know if that would have truly helped them the past couple of years to have a striker that is a lot more mobile and does like to move a lot more than the likes of Zlatan did. But I do think he can provide a different side that maybe LA could be fortunate to have this season. And
I think we pretty much touched on everything LA Galaxy season. It's just a question: can they take that next step and truly compete with LAFC and the big clubs? Can they get back on that level?
I think they will. I think it's time for them to step back up.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and group these next couple teams, and we can kind of just all run through them at the same time. So we have Minnesota, Real Salt Lake, and Philadelphia. Minnesota is coming again off of a playoff year with Ike Opara, still holding it down in the defense. Ethan Finley, who I know between the three of us, definitely a fan favorite from his time on the Columbus Crew. Definitely a lot of love for Ethan Finley. But I don't know if you guys have anything else to add about them, but I just more of the same, I would guess, for them. They're obviously in the Western Conference, which at least in my belief should be the harder conference this year to be in. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything to add about them.
Minnesota definitely have some great players. John Grigas in the midfield, and their right back Romain Medineri is one of the better ones in the league. But this is such a weird team because their first few years in existence, they were completely irrelevant. And then they just kind of took this massive step, right?
Last year. Yeah.
It seemed to me kind of random. It seemed like we're not competing to we're a playoff team. So now I have to question, can they stay there? And on paper, I think they'll take a step back this year, but they'll fall into that group of, they should compete, but I don't think they're a lock. I mean, they finished last season pretty solidly. What were they, fourth in the West? Mm-hmm. So they finished pretty. It was a tight Western Conference. Yeah, it was a tight Western Conference, but they finished fourth place in the West. It's now the question of, can they stay there? And it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say about them. I know Ike Opara is a very, very solid center back, an absolute brick in the back. Realistically, might be the MLS's best defender. I mean, especially like in the league. Like we can all say Walker Zimmerman might be the best defender because he plays for the U.S. men's national team and he is probably the best American center back. But I think Ike Opara is probably the best defender in the league. Other than that, yeah, I mean it's really gonna depend on if they can just maintain their form. I mean, they started last year hotter than could be, and I don't know if they can continue that for an entire season, which is gonna have to be the problem this year.
Yeah, so the next two teams that I was going to add to their bunch was Real Salt Lake and Philadelphia. And we can kind of go through them if we want. Obviously, Real Salt Lake finished third in the West last year. Not really anything too crazy happening with them. Nick Raimondo obviously retires, which is a big thing for them. And then they did bring in former MLS Rookie of the Year Corey Baird.
Not bring in,
or
but-
not,
Yeah.
not bring in. Yes, he's returning. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But they did lose, I guess, a lot more than they gained, at least from kind of, what I would consider. So I don't know if they're going to repeat that third in the West thing, but I would say they're definitely a playoff team for sure.
Yeah, they're not going to repeat third in the West, but they're still a good team. You're right, Brennan. They lost Savarino and they lost Lennon, but Corey Baird's still improving. They still have a good midfield with Albert Resnick and Ramirez and Justin Glad at defense. So I do question their defense. I wonder if it can stay solid in that Western Conference. And you're right, they did lose some talent. They're not going to finish third, but I think they're still a solid team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, I don't have much to say about either of these two teams. I mean, their midfield should be decent. Corey Baird returning. They did bring in one of my most hated players in all the world in Justin Merrim, who is, I mean, I can't lie, he is a decent MLS winger, but he does pop in and out of games, which does make it difficult for him to actually like move along and to be a top player and actually contribute consistently.
All right. So we don't really need to touch on Philadelphia too much. I don't know if either of you guys have anything to say,
Not
but
sure
I don't
Philly.
really know that.
I do want to
Philadelphia-
say I don't understand. I mean, watching Philadelphia last year and looking at their roster throughout the season and now, I don't understand how they did so well, but they did. So on paper, to
Right.
me, this is a team that is going to take a step back.
Maybe two.
But you
As
didn't
I
expect them
say
to do
that-
good last year, so
Exactly. As I say that, they'll still be competing for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I don't understand how they finished with 55 points last season. I don't understand how they did so well, but they did. So I should not be questioning them like I am, but they're going to take a step back. That's just, to me, it's a fact of nature.
I have nothing to say
Alrighty.
about them. They're pretty much just
So next we'll move on to Atlanta United. I'm just going to let either of you guys kind of give your thoughts. I know both of you guys watch a fair amount of Atlanta United games, so I'm not going to waste my own breath talking about them because I know you guys have definitely a lot more experience with them.
Yeah, go ahead,
Matt, go
Corbin.
first. Okay. Yeah, I mean they lost in the semis last year of the Eastern Conference, and they definitely had. I mean, they are a team like outside of their 1 year. I mean, they are a team I do expect to either top the East or be right there to top the East every single year. Joseph Martinez is maybe my pick for MLS MVP, if not Pozuelo from Toronto. He's an absolute baller. I think this is the year Pity Martinez decides he's going to turn it on, and Atlanta United is going to be, again, the most fun team in the league to watch.
Yeah, I mean, not much to add to that. They're going to be the most fun team to watch. They did lose a little bit with Julian Gressel, Darlington Nagbe, and their captain, Michael Parkhurst, but they're such a fun team to watch. Ezekiel Barco is ever growing. He's such a young player, and he's still getting better and better. It's just a matter of time before European clubs start coming for him. But he's in the MLS now, and he's going to light it up this season with Joseph Martinez, with Brooks Lennon, the new signing. So yeah, this team it's championship or bust for them. They'll be disappointed if they don't win a championship this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll always be disappointed. I do want to note that Emerson Hinman does come into this team, who
Mhm.
was at Bournemouth last season, I believe it was.
He was
Is
on
that
loan
right?
at Atlanta
Yeah.
last season, but now it's permanent.
Okay. So he was owned by Bournemouth, I think, and he was at Atlanta. I think watching him in preseason once or twice, you can kind of tell why he didn't work at Bournemouth. I mean, he is just not a Premier League player, but I do say Atlanta United might fit him a little better.
Mhm.
Definitely, I mean, definitely a faster paced team, definitely a more attacking paced team, which it's kind of weird to say that, but like he doesn't have as big as a role or he doesn't have as big as a responsibility because Atlanta United are going to come out and score 2 to 3 goals every single night they walk on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. So obviously we can now go ahead and move on to our next team, which is going to be NYCFC. Yeah, so I mean, for NYCFC, I don't really know if you guys feel any different, but I feel like they kind of overperformed their expectations last year. And personally, I don't see a way. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're not going to make playoffs again. Like, I think they're still certainly a playoff team. But I don't know. Like, obviously, they added Jetty and Zalalem, but, like, I really don't know that makes them too different than they kind of already were last week.
No,
Or last year, excuse me.
I definitely wouldn't say it makes them that much different. I'm really trying to think of any. I mean, they have Maxi Morales still, who should be probably their best player on the team. They have a new center forward in is it Heber, the Brazilian, I think he is, who's
Yeah.
been performing rather well in CONCACAF Champions League. I know he scored a hat trick in the first game. I think he got one more in the second, so he is having a good preseason for them, if that's what you want to call that. And I mean, he sits there, I think, in his late 20s, so he's in the prime of his career right now, and he should be a decent option up front. In the back, I'm honestly not too sure what they're gonna have. They are a team who has kind of leaked a little bit at some time, so it'll be interesting to see what they can do at the back this year.
But keep in mind, they are still playing in Yankee Stadium. They are still playing on a tiny field.
They're still playing on their own field,
They are playing on a field that only they know how to play on. Every other team comes in playing on these, normal size
massive
fields,
fields.
and then they come in and there's 3 steps, an exaggeration, but there's 3 or 5 steps between the edge of the goal box and the out of bounds line, and the touch line.
Yeah,
So
which does benefit them a lot.
they have such an advantage in that aspect usually. That when they play at home, it's just so much more comfortable for them than it is to any other team that's coming there. And Maxi Morales, just building off last season, is such an incredible player going forward. There'll be a playoff team this year, and again, I think there'll be a team that should be making the semifinals. And if they don't, it's a disappointment for them from their standards.
I think they're gonna make the MLS or the Eastern Conference Finals. I think it'll be them and Atlanta that battle it out there.
Okay.
All right, so next team, probably the team I would say most excited to talk about is LAFC. Obviously, they were the defending Supporters Shield, but did lose in the semifinals to Seattle of the MLS Cup last year. Of course, former U.S. men's national team head coach Bob Bradley coming back. Single season goal record breaker Carlos Vela coming back. Obviously, as far as moves, they probably had the biggest offseason, I would say, as far as name value. They lose Walker Zimmerman, who Corbin, kind of as you said earlier, probably the best, if not the best defender in all of the MLS. But they did bring in Bradley Wright Phillips, who obviously gives them even more offensive ability than they had last year, which could be a way that they improve, but we'll just have to see what happens, I guess, because I think losing Walker Zimmerman is probably a bigger deficit than bringing in Bradley Wright Phillips is a positive for the team.
Yeah, I don't really know how they're gonna use BWP. I don't know if they're gonna play him up top and maybe Vela
he's coming
in
in off
behind
the
him,
bench.
or I was gonna say, is he gonna
coming in off the bench? He's not at the level of a starter even in the MLS anymore, but he is still a valuable player off the bench.
Yeah, I mean he will be a quote unquote MLS super sub at some times, but I mean we know where this team's strength is. It's Diego Rossi on the left, Carlos Vela through the middle, and Latif Blessing with a rapid pace down the right. Which is how he kind of sat up last year, which should be by far the strength of this team. Again, a team that will score a lot of goals, but especially with the loss of Walker Zimmerman, could be leaking in a bit more goals than we think.
Well, I guess the one question I would ask before we move on from them is, do either of you think that they are going to be like, do either of you think that they're better than they were last year, or do you think that their chances to beat Seattle are better than they were last year?
Their chances to beat Seattle are the same because they were the favorite to beat Seattle last year. And I think this season,
Gotcha.
I don't think they have a new look defense, but they're such a dominant team going forward, and their defense can make up for their defense. I think they'll bring in, or they have brought in, and they'll develop more their defense. But I still think they're the best team in the West this season.
Yeah,
Like they were at the end of last regular season. I think Carlos Vela, another high 20s, low 30s goal season. And
Well, okay, so we are actually down to now our final four teams that we were going to, the final four teams that we have left to cover in the MLS. So what I'm going to do is group both of these into sets of two. So first off, we're going to do the two finals teams, and then we will go do the new expansion teams. So for Toronto and Seattle, of course, Toronto still have Jose Altidore, Justin Moreau, Jonathan Osorio, Alejandro Pozuelo, like all of them coming back. Not too much changes, I would say, for Toronto FC. Obviously, they added Pablo Piatti, which is something to note, but I think generally speaking, they're basically the same team they were last year, and obviously being the same team you were last year when you finished at the top of your conference is always going to be a good thing. So
I will say, I think this is the thing that might hurt them a little bit more is I don't know if he's the captain, but Michael Bradley's out till June. I know I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he is a ball controller in the middle of the field, and
definitely has been good for the MLS or for Toronto specifically.
He's been very solid for Toronto, which I'm pretty sure Matt's about to say his good old take on Magic Mike over there, but he definitely is someone that I think they're gonna miss until he comes back.
Can we get this? Can we put this in the record books? Corbin complimenting Michael Bradley.
Hey, I've done it before. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often because I only want to see him for the U.S. men's national team, and at this point in the time, I don't want to see him anymore.
Corbin hasn't given Michael Bradley a put up since he scored that absolute banger like 2 years ago against
Mexico, and then
against Mexico.
The chip over the keeper's head. No, Bradley is at the point in his career, and I think he showed a lot, or at times last season. It's just he doesn't have it in him like he used to. So I'm not going to say
he doesn't have the stamina in him, but he definitely has the. I mean, he'll definitely sit a lot deeper, and he'll definitely be a creator from deep. Obviously I'm not expecting him to go out and score 10 goals this season, but
I believe the preseason analysis would tell you that he's going to be the bald Kyle Beckerman.
Yuck! What a bad comparison.
No, but Toronto didn't add much, didn't lose much. They did lose a couple of minor players, rotation players, guys that would back up, just provide sparks here and there. So again, it's just a season for them. You're going for it all. If you don't win it all, it's disappointing because they're
for sure.
Pozuelo is still improving, and he's incredible by MLS standards already. Osorio and Morrow are fantastic players, and Josie Altidore should still have it in him to score 15 plus goals.
I'm going to settle it right now. I'm picking Pozuelo to be my MVP.
Absolutely fair. Yeah, he's an incredible player.
I'm going to lock it in now.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, again, kind of like I touched on before, I think more of the same for this team. And again, obviously, if you're going to have more of the same of last year, you literally made it to the finals. So definitely they've put themselves in a good spot. But we'll go to our now defending MLS Cup champions, Seattle, coming off of, obviously, a gigantic year for them, winning the entire league. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw this to you guys now so you guys can kind of say what you want to say about Seattle and their chances at a repeat.
Yeah, it's interesting because they lost 3/4 of their starting back line for that championship game, 3 out of the 4 defenders, and then the game's MVP, Victor Rodriguez, is gone too. So it seems like they've lost a decent chunk of what won them the championship. But on paper, Jordan Morris, Christian Roldan, Ladero, and Svensson are still their main players, and they still have them, obviously. And Jordan Morris, fully healthy, a year and a half off that uh, messed up knee, right? Was last season his first full season back.
Yep.
He was
Yeah.
iffy at points last season. He was still coming back from that. So
Yep.
now he's fully there. It seems like they've lost a lot, but they're still Seattle Sounders, you know?
Yeah. I will say I do expect them to be pretty much okay. I mean, they're definitely still going to be a top team in the West. Jordan Morris is going to be an absolute baller again this year. They do
If
have
he can stay
Stefan
healthy,
Fry
that
in
is.
goal, who's going to be good. Colin, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
If he can stay healthy, that is.
Yeah, I was going to say if Jordan Morris can stay healthy, he is one of the MLS's best players, and it's not close. But I don't think they will be winning another MLS title. I don't know if they get to the final either, but they definitely do still make the playoffs. But definitely losing a lot in the back half of that field is going to be tough for them to deal with.
Yeah, we'll talk predictions after we get through these 2 new expansion teams here in a second.
Yeah, so I mean, if one of you guys want to go ahead, I know I believe each of you kind of prepared your own thing for each of the teams. So if you guys just want to go ahead and take that, you can just segue yourselves straight into Inter Miami and Nashville.
This is going to
Go ahead.
be, I mean, it's incredible that these are the 2 teams coming into the league at the same time. They're both massive cities. Miami, like we talked about early on in the show, I mean, the following is immediate. There's going to be a massive following for Inter Miami. In Nashville, it's a big city. It's a hipster city, and hipsters like soccer. Okay, like Nashville, the following is there. We've seen it build through their, when they were in the lower divisions. So these 2 teams are going to be an immediate attraction in the MLS. Anywhere they go, the attendance is going to rise for that one game where they are on the road. Um, but are they good enough to be immediate impacts, like competing with other big names? Corbin?
Yeah, and I definitely think you're right 100% on everything you said. 2 big cities, 2 big markets, 2 big time teams that are coming into the league. They both of them added quite a few veterans that I think are definitely going to help them jump into the league a little bit easier than some people may think. In Inter Miami, taking the likes of Will Trapp, Roman Torres, Lee Win is also going to go in there, even though he is getting older. He is a dynamic player in the league. And the obvious addition of Pizarro coming in from, I think it's Monterrey. He's in the prime of his career, and attacking midfielder should provide a lot of creativity going forward. Obviously, with David Beckham running the side and the attacking force that he was when he played, they're definitely going to be a fun side to watch. Nashville, I have no idea what to think of them yet because they do have a little bit of more seniority in some of their guys. I will say, on draft day when they went like 10 hours to their number 1 draft pick's house, that was a little sadistic. I didn't like that as much as I thought I would. I'm not going to lie. If that was me, I would have taken the hat and scarf and told them to get out of there because that was a little weird. But I do think that the addition of Walker Zimmerman was a good one for them to start in the league. But other than that, I'm not truthfully sure how they're going to get along too well this season.
It's obviously harder to predict brand new teams. I think
course.
Inter Miami has set themselves up for a little bit better immediate impact. They just brought in veteran talent. So I think they're a team that could be exciting on the field as well. But I looking at their roster, I don't see them being a playoff team, and I think Nashville is even worse than them on paper.
I will say I do think Inter Miami will fight for a playoff spot. I don't think Nashville will. I think Inter Miami has, like you said, set themselves up a little bit better. I think they will come with a lot of speed. I think they will come with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, like from the get go. Especially with this being their first season, I think they kind of have to, and hopefully that can define them early. And they make high intensity, high passion, and high pressure on the offensive and defensive side their exact style, because that's going to be a really fun team to watch if that is the case.
Yeah, one
Yes,
thing I
so
want
do
to
we,
bring up here real quickly, as far as like what's really up for both of these teams, while both of them are in great locations, I think Inter Miami's definitely in a very tough situation because while their owner is David Beckham and he can always get these great names, if they don't perform this season when they don't get those big guys like they're playing in the future like Neymar, Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, that could be the end of Inter Miami before it even gets started because the market that Miami is in is much like LA. If you fail and you fail hard, you're done. You can never
Yeah.
come back. Just like the LA Chargers and the NFL, the other LA team was LA Rams. They're a little more successful, but even they're starting to fall off a little bit now as far as attendance ratings. But yeah, it's just like the LA. It's just like Miami Heat. Once you start to fall off, you can't get those fans back without years and years of work.
Yeah, and I definitely think you have a case there, which I think Beckham may know that a little bit more than people think, which is why he's trying to stack this team as fast as possible. Now, obviously, he's not getting Neymar, Messi, or Ronaldo within the next 3 years, so he's going to have to do it more internally, or he's going to have to find a different name to bring in. I mean, hell, for all we know, in July he might go buy Gareth Bale. That
Cavani is, I think, the big rumor right now as
Yeah, I was
he's
going to
looking
say
to leave PSG.
Cavani looks pretty likely. I would say that's probably going to be the number one, but maybe he tries to slide in Bale as well if Bale's willing to just go play golf on
Up and
Tuesdays,
retire.
and yeah, just pretty much retire
Put
to
his
go play
career into
golf
the
on Tuesdays.
sunset.
Yeah, just go play
Yeah.
golf on Tuesdays and then go win the MLS on weekends.
Well, I think now's as good a time as any to get into predictions, I guess. So before we kind of wrap up this MLS Super episode that we've kind of put together for ourselves here. So I think as far as general predictions, I would say just kind of give a quick rundown of how you think this season will go, and in the end, I guess just who you think the champion will be.
Matt, go first.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, I was going to ask you, Corbin. Let's go MVP and then
Okay.
MLS playoffs champion and run to go for it.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I am going to take Pozuelo to be my MVP. I think he showed a lot of promise at the end of last season when he was starting to figure out the league a little bit more. He reminds me a lot of Sebastian Giovinco, and that was obviously a good thing for Toronto. I think in the first little bit he might struggle because he's going to have a little bit more defensive responsibility, and he's not a guy that's going to want to play defense. I think when Michael Bradley comes back, he will have a little bit more freedom to go forward and stay forward, which will help him a lot. So I am going to pick Pozuelo to be my MVP. In the playoffs, like I said, I think Atlanta United is going to be probably one of the top teams in the East. I think that's going to be them. I think New York City is definitely going to have a say. Columbus might have a say. For all we know, they are going to be a fighting team, but I am going to pick Atlanta to come out of the East. I'm going to pick the LA Galaxy to come out of the West. I think Chicharito has a fantastic season. I think he starts hot. I think he gets a quick start, and that carries him throughout the year, and he becomes a superstar in the MLS a lot quicker than some people think. But I am going to take Atlanta United to win another MLS Cup.
I'll say,
Yeah.
as far as MVP goes, give me Christian Pavone for the Galaxy. I think
Wow,
last season,
there it is.
I think last season, Zlatan's presence was kind of holding him back, and it's not a knock on Zlatan. He has that dominant presence about him, and like you said, Corbin, it's just a different style with Chicharito there. And I think with Chicharito there dropping more in to collect the ball, that allows Pavone to run in behind to just play more of an attacking threat to defenses. I think Pavone has an incredible season. I think Atlanta. I'm with you. I think Atlanta win the cup, and I think they do it over LAFC, not
All
the
right.
Galaxy. I think they do it over LAFC. I think Pavone has an incredible season, but Atlanta and LAFC are just such incredibly built teams.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be them too.
All right, I feel it. Not bad though.
Yeah. So for me, I'm gonna say. So for MVP, I think in the past, a lot of times like midfielders are always more likely to get MVP, just because like people really, I don't know, I guess people like really feel the impact is more meaningful from the midfield. Personally, my MVP is going to be Carlos Vela, and the only reason that is because I actually have the belief that last season was not a fluke. Obviously, I mean, most people would say that it's not a fluke, but I would take it one step farther and say that Carlos Vela actually could most likely repeat that for a second season in a row. And so Carlos Vela actually is going to be my MVP. And as far as like team that will win the regular season, I'm actually going to probably call for Toronto. I think Toronto will probably be the best team in the regular season of play, but I actually would take LAFC to win the playoffs and win the whole thing.
That's a fair choice as well. Now, do you think Toronto takes it to the cup game, or do you think they go out beforehand?
It's so tough to say like how the East is going to turn out. I mean, obviously for me, like with all biases on the table, I would love to see the Crew actually improve like people think they may be able to. And so like my fandom makes me want to say that I think the Crew actually could, like in theory, be a team that challenges for the top of the East come playoff time. But I think Toronto's just done it so many times. Obviously Atlanta has done it a lot as well, so it would definitely be either Toronto or Atlanta in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think Atlanta is probably a better roster overall than Toronto, in my opinion. But I think I would still take Toronto.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
I am incredibly excited for this MLS season. With these two new teams, it's just a continuously growing league. This should make for another incredible season in the MLS.
Yeah.
For sure.
Also, shout out us for getting ESPN Plus so we can watch every single game of that.
True.
All right, go ahead.
Definitely.
Go ahead and follow us on Twitter. I'm sorry, Brendan. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter at 5 in the midfield. That's 5, the number 5 in the midfield.
Yeah, so I was just saying, just to wrap up the show, obviously that was kind of the preview of the MLS as a whole going forward this year. I think one thing that, obviously, as we all touched on, we're going to be definitely trying to keep up with the MLS much more than we have been as the past. And as this show kind of continues on in cohesion with the MLS season, we're going to definitely be doing our best to give you guys MLS coverage as much as we can. Again, like Matt started to say, if you guys do want to follow us on Twitter and support, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at 5 in the midfield, the number 5 in the midfield. We tweet pretty regularly from there, either our own thoughts or just general thoughts and takes that our group has about any of the matches that we're watching. Very, very active, I would say, during match days, especially Premier League match days and Champions League match days. So, but that is going to do it for our MLS Super episode. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say before I wrap this up.
I'm good.
No, but we covered it all.
Yeah, so that is going to be the end of our MLS preview super episode, I guess is what I've continued to call it. But again, thank you guys so much for the support, and we will see you on the next episode.